Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Skye Snellgrove. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272 and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding gatherings and events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the Provincial Health Orders in effect. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. We have none, Ms. Snellgrove. Next, a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Motion carries. We have no presentations, but delighted this morning to welcome a delegation. Peter Sinclair from the Nanaimo Loaves and Fishes to speak to us regarding financial support to build a new food warehouse and distribution centre. Good morning, Mr. Sinclair.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for your service to the community, and thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. Next slide, please. Other way. Next slide. There we go. In 2014, I appeared before City Council to show you this situation. Our 500 square foot warehouse on Farquhar Street had been completely filled to the point that in order to operate, we needed to pull food out during the day, put it under tarps, so that our volunteers had a place to work inside. It led to the situation where we needed to acquire a new facility. Next slide, please. And so the City of Nanaimo responded by providing half of the budget of $550,000 and provided $275,000 to purchase this facility on Fry Street. Next, and next again, which we were able to transform into this food recovery warehouse. Next slide, please. The results of that investment have been nothing short of dramatic. You can see here, this is the amount of food that Loaves and Fishes has been able to source and distribute each year. Most notably, if you look back at 2020, we had our most successful year ever, sourcing and distributing $6.2 million worth of food. This provided benefit not only for the most vulnerable people in our community, but it also provided significant benefit to other nonprofits. You'll notice as part of this bar graph, the red at the bottom shows the amount of food that Loaves and Fishes has provided free of charge to other nonprofits. In 2020, this was $1.7 million worth of food. Next slide, please. This here shows some of the dollar value worth of food provided to other agencies in our community. Over $118,000 worth of food to Island Crisis Care Society, $45,000 worth of food to Nanaimo Affordable Housing, $48,000 worth of food to Nanaimo Youth Services, and almost $300,000 worth of food to the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District. Next slide, please. All of this success has led to Loaves and Fishes expanding our services across Vancouver Island. Food Banks BC asked if we would provide services on northern Vancouver Island because of a dire need there. This has obviously provided benefit to other communities, but it has also provided significant benefit to the people of Nanaimo. First and foremost, it has allowed us to access funding that would otherwise be unavailable to us. So, for example, the truck today that is on its way to Port McNeill as we speak was bought and paid for by Food Banks BC. This is a $200,000 investment that 1 day a week goes to the North Island and 6 days a week is available for use here in Nanaimo to serve the people of Nanaimo. Additionally, we are able to access food from other places. Most notably, on the way back from the North Island, we often pick up frozen salmon from Campbell River that is then brought back here to Nanaimo to benefit people here. Next slide, please. So the situation that we were in 2014, we are now in again, except instead of filling a 500 square foot warehouse, we have filled a 6,000 square foot warehouse. These are photos that were taken last week. On that picture on the left, you can see there is a stack 4 pallets high of beans. On the same photo, on the left-hand side, you can see a row of pasta and rice. And if you look at the photo on the bottom right, that is what over 100,000 tins of salmon looks like. This is a donation that we received through Second Harvest. This was all fish that was processed at our local St. Jean's cannery and donated to us here at Loaves and Fishes. So as you can see, we are in a very tight situation with very, very little room. To address this situation, the Board of Loaves and Fishes has embarked on an ambitious plan to get a new facility for us. Next slide, please. After looking at existing warehouse space throughout Nanaimo and looking at land that's available, it was determined that this piece of property at 1861 East Wellington represented the best way for us to move forward. And so we actually are using this current piece of land. We've leased it from the current owner to run our Empties for Food program on, and we have it under contract, and we'll be taking possession of this property on May 7th. Next, please. It is our desire to build a food recovery warehouse on this property. Next slide, please. So the budget overall for this process next is going to be $100,000 to get this process started. This is money that Loaves and Fishes has, and we have retained the services of Saywell Contracting to begin designing and planning this facility. Next, please. The purchase of this land will be $1.3 million, and it is on this part of our plan that we are asking the City of Nanaimo to partner with us. Next, please. It is estimated that the construction costs will cost between $6 and $8 million. We are currently in negotiations with the provincial government and are confident that we should be able to see support from them to make construction of this facility possible. Next. So total budget for this between $7.4 and $9.4 million. Next. So particularly for the funding of 1861 East Wellington. Next. We have $95,000 confirmed from the RDN to go towards this. Next. The $275,000 that the City of Nanaimo has already provided to Loaves and Fishes, we would apply to the purchase of this land. Next. And we are requesting the City of Nanaimo provide $930,000 next to ensure we have the total budget of $1.3 million to acquire this piece of land. Next, this investment from the City of Nanaimo is intended to take Loaves and Fishes and the service it provides to the community to the next level. What this slide here shows is the amount of food we've accessed each year, but has also shows the investments that have been made in infrastructure that have allowed this to be possible. We started our food recovery program in 2012, and within 2 months of that program launching, the City of Nanaimo provided $69,000 to purchase our first 5-ton truck. I can honestly say if the City of Nanaimo did not provide that funding, we would not be where we are today. So thank you to the City for getting that started for us. The City then stepped up again in 2014, providing $275,000 towards our warehouse. And then we saw further investments in 2017 that came through Food Banks BC and the provincial government to the tune of $700,000. What this is intended to show is that each time an investment is made in our infrastructure, the results have been dramatic. So our request to Nanaimo City Council for $930,000 is the right investment for our community. Next slide, please. Next. It will provide more food to our most vulnerable citizens. Next. It will provide better access to food because this new facility will have a grocery store type area where people can choose the food that they want to go home with. Next. It will provide significant benefit to the other nonprofits in our community. So when these nonprofits get free food from Loaves and Fishes, they are able to redeploy funds that they would have spent on food into other areas of their operations and thereby make our community better. Next. There are significant environmental benefits to our work, and this specifically relates not only to food ending up in the landfill, but also the dramatic reduction in greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. Next. An investment from the City of Nanaimo will enable us to leverage investment from other levels of government. And next. This investment will build upon Loaves and Fishes' proven track record. Loaves and Fishes has shown that we are a successful organization, we are innovative, and we are leading the way. We are asking the City of Nanaimo to partner with us to continue Loaves and Fishes' great work and show that Nanaimo can be and have the best food bank in the country. Thank you for your time. Next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair. Councillor Bonner's first off.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship, and good morning, Peter. I want to thank you for the work that you did on the Food Security Working Group. I'm glad to see this project coming forward. In the project, are you going to be including a large-scale commercial kitchen for
That's something we will certainly be looking at. And as we put together the plans for it, we'll be looking for, specifically space that could go in immediately or have that space available to be added at a later time. But yes, certainly something we're looking at.
And would that be available for other agencies to use, possibly?
Yes, potentially. Yes.
And when the 275,000
Sorry.
is, sorry?
Sorry, just cut out there.
Yeah, I have another question. It's because the mayor turned me off.
Could you use another phrase?
The 275,000 that you say you're transferring over from the equity on Fry Street, is it your intention to sell that building and transfer that over, or how are you applying that amount?
So in the short term, that would be through financing. Over the long term, potentially through financing, but most likely through the sale of 210 Fry Street. Operationally, we don't anticipate using 210 Fry Street, but given, move into that new facility would be 2 to 3 years out, we would make that decision at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. A question for the delegation. First of all, thank you again. I've been fortunate enough to, up until prior to my wife getting too ill, being able to volunteer there one evening a month, and the amount of food that, the volume that has increased over that time that we were involved is pretty incredible. The one question I have with regard to the volume of food is, what struck me in your presentation is the dollar amounts of the food that are salvaged and repurposed to the exact penny, which surprised me. I just didn't realize what you're basing that on. But the question I have is actually, at the time when we're going through sorting through vegetables and fruit and et cetera, we'd have bins there to put spoiled product that would be then provided to pork producers. I'm assuming that that volume of dollar amount was not included in the amount of dollars that you specified that went to humans?
Yes, that's correct. So those figures there are for the good food that was provided to people. We do track that food that goes to farmers and compost independent of the good food provided to people. Just to give you a sense of it, last month, February, there was 42,000 kilograms of food provided to local farmers.
Thank you.
And just as a note, we don't value that food. We just present it as the weight, because that value of the $6.2 million, that is the weight of the food multiplied by $5.70 a kilogram. That is provided by Food Banks Canada as an independent source for valuing food based on weight.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, thank you, Mr. Sinclair. That was a good presentation, and I appreciate the work you do in the community. I don't think there's any doubt that the work of Loaves and Fishes is highly valued and very worthwhile. There's also no doubt that your ask is a very big one, and that's something that we have to take seriously, and I'm sure you recognize that. I guess it's a compliment to you and your outfit that you're a victim of your own success. And maybe that's a good thing, but again, we appreciate the work you do. My ask is this, Peter, if I may, in terms of the fundraising, Have you planned, or would you be planning some type of public fundraising campaign to help you out? Because, as I just said, it's a big ask, it's a lot of money, and you're going to need more than our help and probably more than the province's help to accomplish this.
Yes, we certainly are. In fact, I've already had companies reach out to us and say that they want to be a part of this through donations of product, actually construction materials, to make that happen. In terms of a broader appeal to the community, that will certainly be a part of it. Initially coming out, though, we're wanting to have the broad plan and get the big pieces in place. And then for the fill-in stuff, the smaller pieces to complete the facility, that's where we see ourselves moving out into the community for support. So take something like pallet racking in a facility like this. That could be well north of $200,000 worth of racking required for it. And so as we get those items, that's where, at least at this point, we anticipate going to the public to make sure that we've got this stuff in place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair, and thank you very much for the most needed work that you do. I know some seniors that take advantage of this program, unfortunately. Building on what Councillor Bonner had said, would you, if council was to seriously look at this, which I'm sure we're going to, would you look at doing like partnerships or MOUs with other groups such as, Food Share, Aboriginal Centre, Telecom House, for the use of the kitchen, et cetera, which then we would be able to share, our investment with other groups?
Yes, we are open to working to any organization, that wants to make our community better. And so one of the things that we have been really, really open about is how we support and work with other groups. And traditionally, that's been through supplying food for their services, but it's also been through supplying equipment for them to use. So, for example, 5 days a week, the Nanaimo Ladysmith School District uses one of our minivans to make sure food is getting out to schools. So with regard to any kitchen that could be in the new facility, we would certainly be open to working with other groups in the community to make sure that that facility is used to its full potential.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair. Appreciate this morning. And to gild the lily, if I may, obviously this community is very fortunate to have you and your leadership and your team providing this incredible service. And as Councillor Thorpe so sagely put it, a victim of your own success, which is a wonderful thing to say in one level and sad in another. But again, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I would invite any of you who have not been to our current facility to get in touch with me. I would love to give you a tour and show you firsthand the need for a new facility. So thank you.
Appreciate it. The next item is reports, and we have a number of them. Let me just say at the outset, I want to emphasize, apart from some of the motions, we're here to listen this morning and hear about existing circumstances with respect to these various reports. So the first is the TK 2140 Portable Radio Replacement Fire Dispatch Transition. That's a pretty long title. Chief Doyle, nice to see you this morning.
Good morning, Your Worship, Councillors. Thanks for having me here this morning. I'd be remiss if I didn't say Happy St. Patrick's Day, especially considering my surname's the 9th most common in Ireland.
I think Ms. Mercer is the only one who's culturally sensitive this morning.
Well, actually,
Ms. Fuller too, yes, but as the radio announcer pointed out with COVID, no one can pinch anybody else. Oh, yes, the CAO, yeah, okay. Oh, goodness, how competitive we all get.
Well, with that, I'll bestow an Irish blessing on you. Good health, good luck, and happiness today and every day. So why don't we get into this here? So I'm sure you've read the report. So the reason why I'm here today is to advise Council that $58,000 has been added to the 2021 to 2025 financial plan funded from the Asset Management Reserve Fund. This is to fund the replacement of Nanaimo Fire Rescue's TK 2140 portable radios. So what is the overarching concern? The big issue is that these older models, we have 43 of. They've been in production for nearly 20 years. We didn't transition away from these until about 2015 was the first newer radio we bought. Specifically, these radios are incompatible with Surrey's emergency signaling technology, which is an issue. Our new radios are, to be very specific, ours have dual-tone multi-frequency signaling, and Surrey utilizes Motorola data communications, so very technical. Actually, that's from the communications engineers. So, but basically, they don't talk to each other. So when a firefighter is in a building, the emergency signaling technology allows the firefighter to quickly call the dispatcher for help. So if I was a firefighter and I went down in a building, I could press the button, it would tell me the unit number, and it would also demark the time, so automatically. Additionally, this is just a best practice in the fire service to have this technology, and we've had it for a long time in and on fire rescue. The reason why this happened is because we had the communications engineer deployed this year, and once they started testing the equipment, they recognized that only one type of our radios would communicate with them with this technology, the other one wouldn't. They started to work on the issue, and they identified three options. One was a programming option, one was a hardware option, and one was the outright replacement. The problem with the first two, the programming and the hardware option, is that they're theoretical. They were trying to find cost-effective measures. I think they were approximately $7,000 and $10,000 or $8,000 and $11,000 dollars to do those. They would call them theoretical. They actually haven't used them before. And the other issue, so they'd call them like a medium risk. And if we did do that, we'd be investing funds into older technology. So these are already nearing end-of-life technology. So the consultant highly recommended us replacing these radios and going with the upgraded model that has the emergency signaling technology. I should add that even if they were able to do the upgrades to the radios, they still don't talk together the way that newer technology does. What it would require is if the firefighter went down, they would actually have to go down and hold the button, which isn't the intention of the technology, and it wouldn't actually give them as accurate information as the new technology would. So in terms of it wouldn't demark the time, and in some of the cases it wouldn't actually say what unit was calling, which is critical information, because what that allows the incident commander to do is if they know the time, they can assess how much air they may have left, how much time they have to get to them, and with the unit number, because it's all marked on our board where our units are, they could theoretically, I mean, if all things being equal, make an assumption where that firefighter was in the building. So that's kind of the nuts and the bolts. Does anyone have any questions?
Councillor Bonner and then Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. So if I read this correctly, you're just advising us you've made this decision, which is fine. I'm fine with the decision. The other two options I don't think are an option. I guess the next question is, what are you doing with the old ones? And do we have the ability to move those into production or use somewhere else?
I should have flipped over my page. I have that on the back side. So with the old ones, we'd redeploy them. The newer, older ones, obviously, the ones that were really old, we'd probably, sometimes we can trade them into Island Communications, a bunch of older radios, and they'll give us a newer refurbished radio or something. But for the most part, we would select the ones that were in the best condition and use them for training so they would minimize damage. And we could deploy those in our Vancouver Island Emergency Response Academy or our training. In scenarios where we wouldn't actually need the emergency call button. So, because they do, even in training, I mean, they get bashed around and they can, antennas can get broken, boom mics can get broken, and those, we got to pay for those, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Chief Doyle. On the discussion portion under number 2, make reference to the format containing the unit ID number, which you referred to, but then two lines later, they make note of unit ID information. Is that just, that tells me that there's more information with the new units than just the number, or is it two separate things?
Sorry, can you say it again? I heard that, I'm just having a hard time hearing you.
Sure, no, that's okay. I've never been told that. Under discussion, unit, at least number 2, you make reference to the unit ID number, which you made reference to, but then 2 sentences later, there's reference to unit ID information. And I wasn't sure whether ID information included an ID number as well as other information, or it's just another way of referencing ID number.
They're not confident that it will communicate the information properly in terms of unit ID information number. So, yeah, the unit ID information. So, I think what they're saying there is that they would be able to tell that maybe the radio number or serial number or something along those lines, but what we need is, so if I have a radio and I'm in a fire, let's say I'm designated attack 1 or engine 1, that would actually come up on the dispatch, with proper technology, that will come up on the dispatcher's dispatcher screen when they press the button, so that they can actually say that attack 1 at, let's say, at, 0930 hours, press their emergency signaling button. So yeah, so the information wouldn't be consistent, like you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the report.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
The next is 2020 budget carry forwards. Ms. Mercer, good morning. Backed up by Ms. Fulla.
Thank you, Your Worship. So at the end of each year, we do a review of all our operating and capital projects. And the review identifies which projects are almost complete, a work in progress, or delayed, and will need to be carried forward into the next year. And so there are many reasons why a project could be carried forward, and some are in the city's control. So for example, if we reprioritize projects for staffing constraints or an emergency comes up, we can reallocate resources and put more emphasis on another project. And some are not in the control of the city, such as weather can impact a project or a pandemic. So for 2020, we've identified approximately $34.5 million in carry forwards, and these projects will be added to the final 2021 to 2025 financial plan. So 81% of the carry forwards of this total are work in progress. So that's just under $28 million. So the report highlights some of the large carry forward projects, and all of which are in progress. So the items listed in the report, they're all in progress. And these 11 projects account for almost half of the carry forward total. And 15% are delayed or not started. So that's just a little over $5 million. So examples of those would be the sponsorship project, which you'll hear about in a report later today. And that was a COVID delay. Partners in the Park project. So we have 2 park projects, and we're waiting for those groups to finish their fundraising. 4% are substantially complete, so that's just a little over 1.3 million. And an example of these are the emergency water supply pump station, and there's some outstanding commitments, so we're just waiting for some bills to come in. And that goes with the same for the Bruce and 5th Street traffic signal project, and we're waiting for final billing. So the substantially complete ones are, the project's complete, we're just waiting for final billing to come in, and sometimes there's a delay from the vendor or the contractors to get their bills in. So the report and attachments provide council with a summary of all projects that are being carried forward by department and by type. And these are carried forward to the 2021 budget year. So department staff are here to answer any questions you may have about the carry forward projects.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Mercer. The question I have, well, I got a few, but we'll start with this one, is what is the difference between internal orders and capital?
Okay. Through Your Worship. So an internal order is an operating project. So it runs through our operating budget, whereas capital, that runs through our capital budgets. They're all projects, but from an accounting perspective, one's operating and one's capital.
Thank you.
We're not overwhelmed with questions this morning,
Well-
Councillor Turley, if you have a few more.
Yeah, I do. Hang on a sec here. I got to find them first.
Probably inspire some others, so carry on.
Okay. I know I'm probably nitpicking here, but sometimes I'm known for that.
Light water merges.
So under the total engineering, public works, there's purchasing lunchroom. Is that, and it's in progress, does that just mean that's supplies for the lunchroom, or is it an addition?
Through your worship, there is, no, it is, they're putting some walls around in the warehouse
So it's
to
construction.
separate an eating space from the washroom space, so that's why they did that.
So I can't go there and have lunch, is what you're saying? No?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think that was. There are a few that, and I'm trying to find one that I had highlighted here, where it's defined as substantially complete. Oh, here it is here, Wellcox Access, where the budget was nearly 200,000. The actuals show 23,000, remaining budget 171, and then carried forward was only 5,000, and I'm trying to get my head around that. It's on page 10 of the report, or page 24 on our agenda.
So through your worship to Councillor Turley, that would be, because it's such a low dollar, I would suspect we're waiting for some outstanding bills to come in.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions from Ms. Mercer on this one? Thank you very much. The next is the 2020 surplus allocation. Ms. Mercer, please.
Me again. So at the end of 2020, the city had an approximate $8.7 million surplus from our 3 operating funds. So we had a surplus in the general fund of $8,482,599, and we had a surplus in our sewer fund of $618,624, and we had a deficit in our water fund of $393,567. So the report lists some larger drivers of the surplus and the deficit for each fund. So I'll start with the general fund. So the general fund, that almost $5 million surplus, over half of it is because of the COVID Restart Grant. So at the beginning of the year, the city did not anticipate getting government grant as a part of the pandemic. So we instituted some cost savings measures to help mitigate any deficit we would have. And these 2 items, so the cost saving measures and the grant, resulted in a larger than anticipated surplus. And wages and benefits of approximately $1.5 million contributed to the surplus. And there were many vacancies throughout the city during the year, and this resulted in some savings being realized. Parks, Rec, and Culture operations, we had some savings there due to COVID, because closing pools and other facilities negated some of the costs that go along with running those facilities. So that contributed about $1.4 million to the surplus. Of course, with COVID, nobody was traveling or really attending conferences. Virtual conferences generally have a minimal charge. So we had about $559,000 worth of savings there. Our interest income, we did better than we had anticipated with our investments. So we had about $401,000 of additional revenue there. The Vancouver Island Emergency Response Academy, their revenues were higher by about $138,000 to budget. So that contributed to surplus as well. And our business licensing revenue was higher by $123,000 over budget. So all of those are some bigger dollars that contributed to the surplus. There's a bunch of little ups and downs throughout, but those were the biggest drivers of the surplus. For our sewer fund, we had higher than expected user fees during the year of about $502,000, as well as $60,000 in unused contingency. So those two items made up most of that surplus. With our water fund, our user fee revenue was down by about $537,000, and water is a hard one to predict because it's based on consumption. Our sewer user fees are, for the most part, a flat fee for the year, whereas water is based on consumption and weather and there's many different factors that can contribute to our revenue. So this year we had a bit of a wetter year going into summer, and that really impacted the water revenue. So that is why we saw user fee revenues down there, and that was offset by about $100,000 in contingency. So those two items made up that deficit. So the report also outlines what staff recommend allocating the surplus to. So for the general fund, we're recommending allocating $1 million to the property acquisition reserve. And when we have a surplus, we try to allocate some money to our property acquisition reserve because it gives council additional funds to purchase land in the future. Some we know there's purchases on the horizon, and others unexpected opportunities to come up. So the more kind of funds we have in there for that, the better. And then the remaining, just $7.5 million, we're allocating to the Special Initiatives Reserve. So as you know, the Special Initiatives Reserve is an operating reserve, and council can use these funds at any time to fund projects and initiatives of any kind. So this reserve gives you the most flexibility to use the funds as you see fit. So during the provisional budget deliberations, staff anticipated that the COVID restart grant would result in a surplus, and that surplus would be allocated to this reserve. So, and as such, council used approximately $5.8 million to fund projects, property tax reductions, the 2021 pandemic costs, et cetera, from this expected surplus. So of that, of this $8.5 million, council has already allocated a good chunk of that money already. So these items are detailed on page 35 of the agenda, just to refresh everybody's memory of what those items were. So with this $7.5 million surplus allocation being added to the Special Initiatives Reserve less what funding is already committed, there is approximately $3.5 million in unallocated funding remaining in the Special Initiatives Reserve. So at the April 14th Finance and Audit Committee meeting, staff will be bringing the final 2021 to 2025 financial plan for council discussion. And at that time, a number of decision items will be presented and discussed. So funding options for some of these items could be the Special Initiatives Reserve. And we need to keep in mind that there are changes that we're still making to the budget. We haven't received growth yet. So there's a lot of moving parts that we're still hammering out right now. And that will affect ultimately the final tax increase. So we should probably wait for discussion in April before you make any major decisions. Of course, it's up, you can make decisions how you want to, but that's just my warning on that, is that if you make decisions today, they may not have the outcome you expect because we don't know some of the unknown variables at this point. So, and also, as we're not out of the woods with COVID yet, being a conservative accountant, council could consider leaving some money in the reserve to, as a contingency for 2022, because we don't know when COVID is officially going to end or what the lag effect on that is. So perhaps having a cushion in that reserve as well to deal with residual pandemic costs in 2022. So more detailed use of the $3.5 million funding can be made at the April 14th Finance and Audit Committee meeting. The sewer fund, we're recommending $28,751 go to the Sewer Financial Stability Reserve, and that's to bring it to its minimum balance, and the remaining amount going to the sewer reserve. for the water fund. The deficit will be funded from the water reserve account. So staff is looking for council approval to allocate the surplus as outlined in the report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercer. Mr. Rudolph, do you want to say something?
Just following up on the conversation earlier with council, this is an information report. We're two-stepping it, to use that term again, because we don't have a complete set of information for you today. What staff have done in the interim is taken a relook at our budget forecast and our own conservative process that we went through last fall, because we did not bring forward a lot of things that we need. We're a growing community, 1.8% a year. We're challenged to maintain service levels with existing service resources. So we find ourselves going to bring forward again to council some of those service area pressures that we are anticipating we would like to achieve some progress on for funding. One of those areas is the RCMP. So we have some significant funding pressures in that area. So that'll be one of the areas. What I was suggesting to council the other night is in anticipation of that day, and since council staff have done their due diligence or in the process of doing that, if council has areas where you would like us to provide information to you on topics or areas that you would like to reconsider or bring forward for consideration in the allocation of this money or some of this money for the April 14th meeting, that would be a good idea. So today, getting a sense of areas of interest, and so we could be prepared to address those in an informed way for you on the April meeting. So this is just, and the primary purpose of today was to make sure that you're understanding that we do not actually have $8 million surplus. We have less than half of that that hasn't been committed, and be very clear where the ground level is on this. And then the uncertainty, the other part of this that we're all struggling with is what is the uncertainty of the future bringing? And so, what are the pressures going to be for the tax rate next year? What are the uncertainties around operating and with all the COVID and that type of thing? So we just, whatever decisions we collectively make and council chooses needs to kind of have an eye on the future, and there's a bit of an uncertainty there. So our argument, I guess, in this would be that we need to be protecting ourselves so we cover the bases so that we don't find ourselves in an unforeseen challenge next fall, heading into the fall budgets process. So, but if council feels it needs a workshop on this or more details and it's not going to be enough on the 14th, that's fair. But if we can get you information and we could expand that meeting to really enable you to have that conversation on the 14th more than just an information report and recommendations, this is what we process is kind of important here today. So that's all I was going to say at the outset of this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Just doing my math, so roughly we have 2.7 million left in unallocated, is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Armstrong, in the special interest reserve, we have about $3.5 million of unallocated.
No, I was just doing the math because like it's 8.5 minus 5.8. So.
And there was some carry forward. There was a balance in there already, so there was a bit of a balance carry forward from the previous year.
Obviously, I'm conservative as well, so I agree with both of you. I think this money should be not touched for this year. Ontario's just entering the third wave of COVID, and they're very concerned about their economy. So for me, I would be leaving the money alone till our next budget, and then if we need it, we can use it. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Mercer, thank you very much, and Mr. Rudolph. And I certainly agree with your comments and your suggestions. I think both of you have answered the question I had, because I was just a little bit confused looking at this, which seems to indicate that we suddenly have a surplus of $8.4 million. And first of all, we know that, as you indicated, half of that at least is from the COVID restart grant. But my question is this: I thought we'd already basically had this discussion, had some decisions made around that grant money, and had decided how to allocate that. So when I read your recommendations or options on page 36 of my agenda, I thought that some of those decisions at least had already been made. And here I'm seeing that you're asking the audit committee to approve. Am I off base there?
No, it's just in a sense, it's a formality that we get that approval to allocate that. We had discussed that back in November, December, of allocating the surplus there, but this is more of a formality of getting council's ultimately approval now that we have final numbers.
I see, thank you. And I always take the opportunity to compliment our finance department on their amazing ability to predict and deal with our budget, which is over $200 million, and not being allowed to slide into the red. We have to maintain something above that baseline. And on paper, $8 million looks like a lot, but really it's not. And I think you're quite right. Was it Mr. Rudolph or yourself who said we're not out of the woods with COVID yet? So I think we still have to be very cautious. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I read this report 3 times, I think, to finally get it, and your explanation this morning really clarified, so thank you. I just want to confirm, on page 5, the allocations already coming from the Special Initiatives Reserve Fund that are going to end up leaving us with 3.5, those decisions have been made?
Yeah.
Okay, and now you're asking, we have 3.5 million remaining, and Mr. Rudolph is asking us to flag any, like, are we going to take a conservative approach, or are we going? So how much in general, prior to COVID, how much did we keep in that reserve fund if we have 3.5 right now?
I think we had about $1 million in leftover. I'll have to confirm.
And it's a new reserve that we only created when we had the 2019 surplus.
Yeah.
So when COVID came, we created this reserve more in this.
So coming into, after you made all your decisions in December, I think it was about $1 million we had left unallocated in the Special Initiatives Reserve. Is that your question?
Yes, because that reserve was newly created, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to establish, do we have a common baseline, and how far above or below is 3.5 million in that reserve?
Yeah. So we have an extra $2.5, $3 million, the more than we had anticipated, and because of the grant.
Yeah. Okay. So to Mr. Rudolph's point or question, what I have coming on the horizon is that permit review and ensuring that what comes out of that, the recommendations that we have, the ability to fund to ensure that we're issuing permits on time to keep our business community happy. But overall, I think I'd probably take a conservative approach, recognizing that we're not out of COVID yet. Thank you.
Councillor Martman? Or
Thank you.
Mr. Rudolph, did you want to? No? Councillor Martman, and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. I understand wanting to take a conservative approach and that we actually don't have 8 million, we have approximately 3.5. But I'm wondering if part of that can't be applied to taxes, in lowering taxes. I'm thinking if we have a surplus, that a little bit should be going back to the taxpayers. And I think the same thing with the sewer fund, of whether or not we could review the sewer rates. Maybe that can be looked at. And one other thing, if there's anything on my wish list, it will be helping the loaves and fishes. Homelessness is an issue, and feeding the people in our community is huge, and especially right now during the pandemic. I think the food bank is unfortunately very successful and will continue to be. I'd like to put them out of business, but if there's anything on my wish list, it will be finding a way to help loaves and fishes. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And again, thank you to staff for a very informative report. And it pretty well sums up what we've been talking about for the last couple of months. And I understand, the amounts that were sitting in front of us. Does the surplus that you're referring to that we'll probably have at the end of all this also include the decision last Monday to allocate another $500,000 to move up the projects for the sidewalk on Halliburton?
Yes, I believe it does. Yes, it does. I got an updated number this morning, so it includes the sidewalk project for Halliburton.
Okay, and I'm of the same opinion of the others on council. I think we've done a fair amount already. There's nothing wrong with just sitting and relooking at our options for the future. I would also like to mention that not only thanking finance for the work that they did, but I think long-term, we have weathered a rather huge event, relatively, I'm saying relatively financially unscathed. And this is a testament to the city being relatively having little pots all over the place, so that, like Victoria, where a huge amount of their budget is from parking, they're hurting right now because of that, because parking just basically disappeared. So I think going forward, from a policy point of view and a management point of view, is making sure the city can weather events that come forward by not making sure that all of our money comes from one pot. That is, risk management, basically. So I think that's a testament to the city and the work that's done by past councils and past administrations to make. And I don't think it was necessarily done to make sure we weather the storm, but it certainly has happened in this case, and we should look at it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, staff, for the report. I'd just like to move the recommendation.
Move the recommendation. No, there is a motion. Seconded, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Gesselbrock, do you wish to speak to it?
It's great. I'm glad that we have a surplus and look forward to deliberations on it later on. Thank you for the work.
Councillor Armstrong.
I just want to echo what Councillor Hammond said. I think that's a really good point, that if out of that permit review that we need new positions or something, I would be in favor of that as well. And to Councillor Martman's point, I would like to see that reserve, if not required, used at next year's taxes to start at an even lower base. I wouldn't apply it to this year's, but our upcoming budget. Thank you.
If I may speak to this presentation generally, firstly, thank you. Always appreciate the work of the finance folks. I mean, essentially what you're telling us is the pot isn't as big as it looked. And media, no criticism of the media, but others may think we've got $8 million cash sitting around unmarked and ready to be spent. And essentially what the motion that has been seconded this morning is for us to keep the wallet shut for the time being until we have a better idea of the lay of the land. And it's not $8 million to spend, and we're going to have to use it wisely. I think most of us, speaking to the budget last year, all recognized that last year might not be bad, but this was likely going to be the tougher year in terms of finances generally. And as Councillor Armstrong's pointed out, God forbid we'll see it, but there is the potential of a third wave. Notwithstanding all the optimism, I see a lot of people out doing a lot of things in accordance with Dr. Henry's recommendations and guidelines and rules and directions, but also just a general slackness, if I may phrase it that way, and so nothing is certain. So I'm certainly going to vote happily in support of the motion. I appreciate Councillor Martman's remarks about perhaps being able to reduce some charges, but as the sewer is not a big surplus versus the amount of money we actually collect on that amount. I'm not sure what the percentage is in terms of the surplus, so to speak, but I suspect it's not that high. I looked at the total number.
I can
and
tell
Ms. Mercer's
you.
going to tell me. Or
I don't have that. Oh, hang on. Sewer fund, it was higher than normal. It was about 12% of the budget. It was higher than we normally see. We do our best to predict growth, but when sometimes that we're off the mark.
And with respect to water, notwithstanding our best management, we're dependent on the weather and consumption and whether or not people feel comfortable with a green lawn or a brownish lawn or something in between. So I'm certainly going to support the motion, and I thank Council for their comments and staff for their presentation. Mr. Rudolph.
So, Your Worship, just to kind of close it on the staff side, so we will be coming back with a staff report. There are a couple of issues that are definitely going to be on your plate for the next meeting. And this is a corollary report, but it's tied to it. One is the Chamber of Commerce asked for a freeze on business class taxation. So it gets into the taxation observation. So the general question is, with respect to taxation this year and next, I think you need to have a bit of a setting for that in terms of decisions, because you may choose to to go there, and we were anticipating that. The development permit report is coming to council Monday. Mr. Nielsen will be here for a fulsome presentation, as you can expect, and it's very thorough, and it does have some cost implications. Not humongous, but not definitely in order to advance that file forward, he's making some recommendations. And then again, the staff are going to revisit the entire portfolio of things that, as a minimum, we would like you to be aware of in terms of pressure points in the organization. And one of those that's come to my attention is in the RCMP area and the fleet and that type of thing. So we'll be flushing out those for you, and so you have that set of information. But I think you need to kind of look at it from a principled point of view. How are you going to approach this? And so I think you've given us some pretty good guidelines today. And in the absence of any more details, it's hard for you to comment, I think, today. But we'll make sure that we've allocating sufficient time on the 14th of April so that you have enough time to go through that and be comfortable with your decision making.
Thanks, Mr. Rudolph. Councillor Brown, do you have a question? No? Very good. Then all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is CAL's Replay Fund. Ms. Mercer?
Thank you.
Or is Mr. Harding going to?
Mr. Harding will be here to answer any questions you might have about the project. So this report is just to advise the committee that we have applied for the CAL's Replay Fund grant in the amount of $28,519 for the Harewood Centennial Park accessible and inclusive playground upgrade. And this funding would cover the cost of purchasing and installing the poured-in-place rubber surfacing at the park or at the playground. We have in the past applied for this grant and have received some funding from it. And so with this grant intake, the funding announcements are expected to be in April of 2021.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Mercer or Mr. Harding? Good news story, we hope. Thank you very much. The next is sponsorship asset inventory and valuation for the City of Nanaimo. Request for proposals to be issued. Another report, Ms. Mercer.
Thank you. I promise this is my last one. A request for proposal, or an RFP, is ready to go to market for this project later this month, and it is anticipated that the contract will be awarded in late May. If we issue it later this month. The city will be requesting proposals from qualified and experienced consultants to provide a comprehensive sponsorship, asset inventory and valuation, as well as strategic options for implementation and sustainment. So some of the deliverables will include, one, a comprehensive sponsorship, asset inventory and valuation. So an itemized inventory that identifies all sponsorship assets and provides a fair market value of those assets. So a sponsorship asset can include municipal programs, services, facilities, events, etc. Second deliverable is the implementation and sustaining strategies. So based on the inventory and the asset valuations, the consultant will develop both an outsourced and an in-house strategy for the city to consider to implement and sustain the resulting sponsorship program. And a third deliverable would be a draft sponsorship policy for staff and council consideration. So staff will provide progress reports and prepare decision reports periodically over the period of May to October. And the anticipated sponsorship program will be designed with the donut economic philosophy in mind and will provide additional revenue streams for the city. So Mr. Harding has been involved with that project. And so between the two of us, hopefully we can answer any questions you have.
Mr. Harding, any comment before we move to questions? Thank you very much.
Your Worship,
This
was approved, this budget for this over a year ago. It was ready to go this month. I suggested that we bring it to council just to remind you that this is coming forward and that this is the deliverable. So this is just a heads up that we are now proceeding with this project. Ms. Lagan is the lead on this project, and it's going to be very interesting. And you know, one of the things in tying it in with budget is being able to find alternate sources of funding. It's really an important thing in addition to the taxation on the residents and the businesses of the community. So we just wanted to double check that we are all on the same page with this project, and this outlines the scope of what the RFP will include, and certainly will be engaging council. I liken it to the social procurement initiative where we started down a path, and so there'll be opportunities for council to be engaged on this process and update it throughout.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley, Thorpe, and Bonner, in that order.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to, I'm assuming either Ms. Mercer or Mr. Harding. With regard to sponsorship, is there going to be, with the consultant, be asked to what they consider to be the lowest limit of where we would seek sponsorship? And my thought behind that is, if you get down to a smaller amount, is it really worthwhile going through all the staff time and effort to try to get a sponsorship for a specific property? And if so, will there be some sort of determination of what that level is?
Mr. Harding.
The evaluation work that the consultant will do will help determine that. Also, the end of it will be developed a draft policy for council's consideration, and those types of issues can be also established by council. What truly is sponsorship? What is donation? What is benevolence? Those types of things.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding. I'm really pleased to see this moving ahead, and I think it's an opportunity for the city. But noting the time frame on this, my question to Mr. Harding is, without getting into any specifics, because that might involve in-camera information regarding negotiations, is there an opportunity, or could there be an opportunity, to take advantage of sponsorship possibilities in the shorter term before we get this entire report finished and framework established?
Your Worship, there is. It would be, the idea though is the goal of this is to have an overall clear picture of what is out there for council to consider for sponsorship. There is one we're going to bring back to you regarding Roxman Stadium in the next little while. That one is underway, and it's using the same model because there was a time issue with it. So that one will come back in camera to council. If another issues do arise as we go through this, I'm sure we can bring those issues to you. But the goal would be to do a comprehensive evaluation of all the sponsorship ones we do already have that have maybe expired, and the newer ones that could come forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship, and I'm also glad to see this coming forward. I remember attending the first workshop at FCM when we first went to one, and glad to see it's finally making our table here. And further to my earlier comments on our surplus and Mr. Rudolph's, this is another pot that we can get income for the city, and it's not raising taxes to do it. So I'm very much in favor and glad to see this is coming forward. Thank you.
No further questions on this topic. Ms. Mercer, thank you very much. We're going to toss the torch to Mr. Harding, Port Theatre, chiller equipment renewal and low carbon electrification options.
Thank you, Worship. We have a number of reports for you today, and so different staff that have actually the knowledge experts on this, and this is definitely the first one on the chiller. So this is some different work that we've brought to council on different venues that we have that we know have some energy savings and also update opportunities. The Port Theatre chiller is one, and I'll turn it to Mr. Groot or Mr. Manager to answer any questions you may have on the program and the recommendation.
Gentlemen, good morning. Councillor Gesselbrock wants to say something already?
Oh, was there going to be a presentation? Sorry. Oh, go ahead. No. Okay, I appreciate the report. I appreciate the recommendation to go ahead with the replacement, the option that's going to, address emissions as best as possible. And so I'd just like to move the recommendation. Thank you.
And there's a seconder, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and I'll be happy to support that motion, but just for the benefit of viewers or listeners, I think it would be good to hear a brief presentation just so people know what we're talking about and what we're spending money on. So that's my thought. I'd prefer to get some background information that others can learn from.
Exercising my enormous authority as mayor of Nanaimo, I really like that idea. So
Okay.
you've come this
My
morning.
apologies, Your Worship. Definitely, Mr.
little
Pam, just
crazy.
can give you a quick overview of the,
Sure.
of the project.
Your Worship and
Sort
Council.
of hot and cold all at the same time is my read on this.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So this project is with Port Theatre. It's an opportunity to look at renewing the chiller equipment in the facility, which is used for cooling the facility. And part of our normal asset management and renewal practices are to look at when equipment's meeting end of operational expectations, and then to study what the options are for replacing with equipment. And these days, looking at trying to reduce greenhouse gases is really paramount, of course. So we conducted a low carbon electrification study, and it presented 2 different heat pump options. And one of them is quite unique because it takes advantage of heating and cooling at the same time. And the other one, option 2, actually has to either heat or cool. So those are the 2 different options that were come up with. And as you can see in the report, there's difference in greenhouse gas savings as well, but they do come at a cost. So
Everything good in life has a cost. Councillor Hemmings.
Thank you, Your Worship. I made a note in that section of the report about the reduction in GHG emissions, and I just thought that was a really, obviously there's a clear connection here, but in terms of what we're trying to do overall as a city with donut economics, having those sorts of measures in our report is really good for us, I think, to think about the broader impact of our decisions. And a question I had, it says the system capitalizes on the load diversity within the building with potential to recover heat. I'm hearing you say it's more than a potential. If we go with this one, it's going to be able to heat and cool and reduce our use of the boilers. Is that accurate?
yeah, Your Worship, to Councillor Hemmings. So yes, the option 1, just the equipment, the way it's set up is certain areas of the building, it can be heating mode and certain can be cooling at the same time. So that's the added benefit of the first option. And with that ability, it has a greater GHG or greenhouse gas reduction potential than the other option.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I thought I'd add a little levity to the discussion here. I just want to point out under the summary points that I truly appreciate the wording that you've used, which states reach the end of operational expectations as opposed to end of life. So thank
you. Never hurts to thank staff for their hard work. Anything further on this? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding, Soroxman Stadium maintenance for 2021.
Thank you, Worship. I'll do more presentations now then, if you want. So this is, with this coming forward to you, is just before the final operating budget is being approved in April or May. The stadium, the 2021 is a real unknown year for us for a number of reasons, and so we need we took the operations over from the stadium from the society, who just, given the pandemic and other issues, can't maintain as they were planning to maintain, which increases our cost. Plus, our revenues are quite in flux this year with the stadium, not just for the stadium component of users, but also we were using the lease money of the parking lot from VIU to offset some of our operating costs here, and that lease is expired and terminated due to the fact there's no students on campus. So with that, we were needing to come and increase our operating budget for that particular stadium and sports field to the tune of $59,113. And that's, again, depending on how we do with our revenues, could be better this year if things open up. If the Night Owls get to play, other teams get to play, that will offset it. But right now, this is what we see is what's required to keep the stadium going.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. Ms. Davis, good morning. Want to add anything?
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, Council. It's nice to be here again. We have done our best here to put together a operational plan for the maintenance of the stadium, and we're keen to do so and make sure that we've got the best stadium possible for this season.
Thank you. Anyone care to make the recommended motion? Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but the recommendation is to fund from general revenue. And since this seems to be a result of shortfalls regarding COVID, why would we not fund it from our surplus that we're expecting to have?
I'll mention, and then Ms. Mercer can add on to it. We see this as a long-term. We're taking over the operations for the long term, and so there is definitely those actual costs to maintain it. So we see it as a longer-term issue. The pandemic relief was short-term, but Ms. Mercer may want to answer that question.
Ms. Mercer.
Through your worship. So as this is an ongoing operating cost, we wouldn't fund that from a reserve. We would include that in taxes, because if we funded it in 2021 from the reserve, 2022 we're going to require more funding, and that will put pressure on an increase in the tax rate for 2022. So it's an ongoing operation, so it would be funded from taxation.
I guess my next question then is, are we expecting then to see a tax increase go up 0.05%?
At this point, I can't say what the increase would be because we're still trying to hammer out some of the final numbers in the budget. So it would be a minor increase to the budget, yeah.
Okay. I'll wait for that day.
Yeah. On the April 14th, we'll have some more solid numbers for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I just want to comment, as I usually do on this topic, that I think Sir Oxman Stadium is a tremendous asset to our city and our citizens. And I'm glad that I'm personally glad that the city has taken over maintenance, and because I think we can give it the care that it needs. And I really see this as an investment in a very valuable asset. And down the road, I can see this as another good source of income from the city. So I think it's well worth investing in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. Anything related to sports facilities in this community has huge potential, and has already in the past has proved very valuable in terms of sports tourism, so all useful. Motion's been made. All those in favor? Councillor Armstrong? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is Bevan Park Pool Improvements for 2021. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Worship. Again, given the planned long-term closure of Bevan Pool, we wanted to utilize the opportunity to do some improvements in the facility. So Mr. Groot and Ms. Mork have worked with their staff to come up with a program to go through it. And if you have any questions, specifics, a lot of it's to do with the washrooms, the doors, other things also to kind of open as a post-pandemic, but also in anticipation of the touch points, those types of things that we're seeing more and more needed in public facilities. So that's our recommendation, to take $225,000 from the Facility Development Reserve to do that work before we reopen the pool. And Mr. Groot or Ms. Mork can answer any questions you have on the specifics.
Mr. Groot, did you want to say anything before we get to questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. I really do believe this to be an opportunity to complete some work that the closure allows to expedite some work that typically would happen in the smaller windows of closures that we have annually. So by grouping this together, it will have a lesser impact on future closures or future shutdowns. And it really will have a good impact on the community when they do return to this facility. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. This is a process question, if I may. When the fire department was in front of us, they said, we've amended the 2021-25 financial plan, and this one is, we're recommending that council amend. I was curious to why does the fire department get to amend it and without our permission, basically, and this one is an ask?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner. So the radios are part of the dispatch project, with the dispatch moving out of Nanaimo to Surrey. So that was not a cost that we anticipated in the presentations that were given to you. And we need to do them for safety reasons. So we felt it was more of an information report saying this is part of the costs of that. Whereas this project or this funding is for something that hasn't been brought forward to you. So is this something you want to do? Whereas a decision had already been made on that, and that was an additional cost.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Sorry, a lot of the machines, like the sinks and the toilets, will be moving to touchless. Just a request on the toilets. I notice with the touchless, sometimes they can be a little trigger happy. And if we could, on the procurement of those, find a good design. Thank you.
Might have something to do with volume, Councillor. Well, shall I call for a movement or a motion? Moved by Councillor Bonner. Is there a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Any further discussion on this motion as recommended? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. The next is proposed development of a medium-sized stadium at NDSS Community Field. Mr. Harding again, please.
Thank you, Worship. Last but not least for us today is, if you remember back in July last year, we came to you with a presentation of looking at finally focusing on a stadium that we could make as our major game field. So for a variety of different sports. Through that presentation, Council recommended that staff go out and work with the school district first and then other stakeholders. So throughout the fall, we did that. We've presented to the school board and staff, and we have a motion of support for that, as well as some of the major users. We also did, through the Reimagine process for our stakeholder interviews, particularly with the sports field groups, we would start off with the stadium concept, and then we went into the other Reimagine questions. So we were able to get out to many different groups and organizations, which all support the fact that we do focus on one location that can provide all the amenities for game day or larger events. So with that, we're coming back to you with 4 recommendations. One is that NDSS Community Field be designated as a medium-sized stadium site for the State of Nanaimo. 2, that a phased implementation plan with options and costing be developed for Council's review and consideration in making NDSS Community Field a medium-sized stadium. And I'll just pause there. We may be coming back relatively quickly with you on that, because there may be some, if we do roll out of the pandemic and some of the teams do get up and running later this year or early this fall with some interim improvements, we need to make that happen with pandemic restrictions and also for some future opportunities. The other thing aspect of it within one of the benefits of NDSS Community Field is, as we improve Roxman Stadium and Rotary Bowl, there's some common things we can put together. So when coming back to you, you'll see it won't just be for the stadium, but it'll be how washroom, parking, food services will be established that would also benefit the other venues in the area. And that's recommendation 3. And that with this, that the current joint use agreement with the school district 68 be updated to address any changes required of this location being a medium-sized stadium.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. Any questions? Councillor Armstrong?
Should this recommendation get approved, when you go to number 3, the development of the phased implementation plan, could that be something that could go to the Accessibility and Diversity Committee, especially if we're going to be looking at washrooms and where we place food courts and stuff? So I think that would be a great place to look at that plan as well.
Absolutely great.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've had a question from a member of the public regarding the transition of the Raiders to the up to ND and the walkability of that compared to Caledonia if you're downtown. Can you just comment on, you mentioned parking. Will parking be reconfigured? I know right now it's a gravel lot next to it. And or what's the transit situation to make sure that people can get there?
So one of the benefits of the site is that it isn't close to downtown, you're right, it's further away, but it is on a major bus route. And also, a lot of different cycling trails and such that go to the stadium. With the school board parking, our parking, VIU parking, it's now also another opportunity for after evening kind of events, weekend events. So the parking is around the area that we can utilize. The goal, one of the implementation goals will be to pave the parking lot and make it more usable in that way. And I think
That was it. And a further one, if I may, have we any thoughts? I know it's all in the air, but regarding the use of Caledonia Park going forward, if the Raiders move?
Yeah, that's a good question, Your Worship, to the Councillor Hemmens. One of the interim requests will most likely come back with you in April or May is to move the 720-seat bleachers. We built those a number of years ago with the intention that they can be moved if required. So one of the recommendations, we have some dollars in this year to actually move them. So that would be the chance to move that and also then look at what are some opportunities for that area. It still is a good soccer pitch. It's a good pitch. It's soil-based, so it can't take a lot of different uses, but it is a good field. Doesn't get the use that it used to get. But those, we can look a little bit more at what those are. Like moving the bleachers out will also open it up with sight lines, and some other opportunities there could be looked at.
Great. And just a general comment as a parent of kids who run at the Rotary Bowl, having everything centralized there and having amenities that feed that centralization would be amazing. I think it's a real opportunity.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I feel compelled just to say that looking at the pictures on page 69 and 70 of my agenda, it just makes me feel very proud of the facilities we have in that area. It's really something our city can brag about, and I'm looking very much forward to the implementation of this plan and seeing things further develop. So I'm happy to make the motion on the recommendations if there's no other questions.
Thank you very much. Seconded Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any contrary? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have no other business? Yep. Councillor Martman, sorry.
I'm not sure how to proceed on this, but we had a presentation from Loaves and Fishes today, and I'm wanting us to either, I guess, make a motion to move that staff review the Loaves and Fishes for funding, identify options, and provide a report to council for information. There, thank you. Seconding?
Seconded Councillor Gesselbrock. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Motion to adjourn.
I was waiting for Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.